Who are those guys? What are they doing on
familiar.
our show?
No idea. Isn't that Anthony Magnabosco there?
Yeah, looks like his car. How are you doing, Neil?
I've got some coffee in me now, so I'll be able to function a lot better.
Okay. Hello and welcome to Talk Heathen. I do not have the little button that gives you an audience cheer, but I know that you're all cheering on the inside. I'm Bianca, and with me is Neil, the 604 Atheist.
Hello.
Hi, Neil.
Hello.
I'm so excited to have you on the show.
I know. I'm pretty excited myself. Was when you messaged me the other day, I literally danced around here like a little kid, waving my hands in the air and stuff. It was like, yay, Talk Heathen.
Well, this might not be common knowledge to people, but when I first got started, one of the very first people to invite me onto their show for an interview was you. So I'm excited. Yeah, you were one of the very first people to give me a little bit of a platform. So I'm happy to return the favor here.
That's awesome. Thank you very much. And I think we had a great show. It was a lot of fun.
Oh, yeah. And we're going to have another one.
Indeed we are.
So tell us a little bit about yourself, Neil. What do you do? What's your role in this here atheist YouTube community?
This atheist YouTube community, my personal niche that I picked out was because of others that I'd seen and do this sort of thing, and I noticed that there weren't too many channels doing it, so I decided to listen to people talk about their journeys away from their original beliefs or faiths or whatever. So I do literally deconversion stories, and I sometimes have guests, I should say, on that were cradle atheists, but we also end up talking about religious influences on our lives and stuff like that, and discuss, how we dealt with that, especially if they were family members, stuff like that. So I've had quite a few very interesting conversations. So some of them are heartbreaking. Some of them are woo type stories. So, it's an up and down roller coaster ride sometimes.
Wonderful. Well, I am very excited to have you on this show because we do end up talking to a lot of people who are in the process of deconverting, in addition to theist callers. So before we jump to callers, I am going to give a few announcements. First, as always, the Atheist Community of Austin is a 501c3 nonprofit, which means we subsist solely on donations. So if you would like to keep us active and running during this quarantine time, while we're dedicating time to come to you from our homes, that would be much appreciated. You can donate directly to the show at patreon.com/talkheathen to me, and all the proceeds there go directly back to the organization. Thank you. Neil does. Be like Neil. In addition to that, if you are interested at 3 p.m., so in about 2 hours, the nonprofits will be live on Discord. So be sure to go to the ACA Discord to check them out. We also, as always, have our merch that if you would like to get access to, you can find at bit.ly/AEN merch. This is going to be phased out once we can actually hang out together again and shoot a new intro. So I know we've been saying that for a while. We'll continue to say that until it actually is phased out. But if you want to go grab a vintage Talk Heathen item, feel free to do that. I
better get on that.
Yeah, right? Hurry up. It's only been 6 months since we told people it was going away. And if you are interested in calling the show, we still have some lines open. Feel free to reach out at 512-991-9242 or call us toll free in the US and Canada at 877-326-3166. I have not memorized that one. That one's brand new to me, so pardon me for that stumble there. All right, Neil, do you want to get into calls?
Yeah,
perfect.
Absolutely. I hear we have someone paying by the minute, so we should probably get them on here.
Yes, let's go to Rachel in Australia. Hi, Rachel. Can you hear us?
Hi.
Hello,
Rachel.
Yeah, I can hear you fine.
To the show. What can we help you with today?
Oh my goodness, I can't believe I'm the first caller. That's so cool. So I was calling in because I wanted to know how you guys would respond, or how you have responded to people who say to you, you are never a true Christian. Because I actually heard this from my own mother, of all people, and I actually found it a bit offensive. I was like, you can't tell me what I am and what I'm not, or what I was and what I was not. And I'm like, I just didn't really know what to say or anything like that. And so, yeah, I was just wondering what you guys' opinion is of that.
Yeah. Oh, that's a really good question to start off with, I think. Neil, do you have any thoughts right off the top?
Well, I'm very big on conversation. I'm trying to figure out what we are referring to when people make comments like that. Like maybe talk to your mom about what she thinks or what she feels is the quote unquote perfect Christian. And maybe you guys could talk that way to each other and maybe figure out your own personal views on it, stuff like that. And who knows, maybe after your conversation, she might think you're an actual real Christian.
That's a good point. Determining definitions during conversations like this
Absolutely
is very important. Rachel, one thing that I've struggled with this as well. I've gotten this many times from people who even knew me back when I was a Christian, and at the time saw me as somebody who was very sincere, very devout, et cetera, et cetera. So it took me a while to formulate my response, and I would like to share it with you. And this is kind of a gotcha. So it's different than Neil's approach. So it depends on the time you're going to use it. So you can sit down and have a good conversation with your mom about what true Christian means to her and all of this.
Yeah.
Or you could kind of say, okay, well, I thought that I was a true Christian. When I was not a true Christian, let's grant that I wasn't, I truly believed that I was. So if I thought I was and I wasn't, how do you know that you are a true Christian? What is the falsifiability here? What are you using to determine that you are a true Christian if I also thought that I was a true Christian? And kind of go from there. And then usually what ends up happening is we start calling into question free will, which is, okay, so some people are born and they are not true Christians, but they think they are. And other people are born real true Christians and can't tell the difference between the true Christian and the untrue Christian until some later point down the road. But if somebody considers themselves a true Christian, but is not a true Christian because at some later point they will deconvert, that means that their future is already set. And that means that they do not actually have choice in the matter. And so then how can you blame me for not being a true Christian if I never even had a choice about whether or not I was?
Very good point.
Wow. Okay. That's a really interesting perspective and a really interesting response. I feel like the second time this happened to me, I was talking to someone on Discord who was a fundamentalist Christian, and they said the same thing to me. Well, you were never a true Christian because you deconverted. And I did try to ask them, like, well, what makes a true Christian? And they just said something along the lines of, it's your actions, like how you behave determines whether you're a true Christian or not. But yeah, like I don't know, like I've thought about this a lot because I'm kind of like, is it actually offensive? Like, is it okay that I feel offended that people say this to me, or should I just like not really care? I don't know.
Oh, you should totally like if it offends you, then it offends you. It's not necessarily something that you should beat yourself up about at all. I do think that it is invalidating and infantilizing and gaslighty to tell somebody that what they truly believed. And honestly, most of us have given up a lot of opportunities and a lot of options in our lives was somehow untrue to us, and that we were lying the whole time or fooled the whole time. And yeah, it is an offensive thing to say. I don't know, Neil, do you get offended when somebody makes this assumption about you?
Not really, but I've always been of the camp that I really don't care what people think of me. So I'm going to be me regardless of what people think. So it's never really been offensive, but I've never really been called not a true Christian because I was raised in the Jewish faith. So.
Okay. That is an important point to raise then.
But yeah, you were never a true this or a true that.
Right.
What are you gauging that on? Like you don't know what I did.
Exactly. It is purely subjective to my mind.
It
but
is.
Rachel, I don't think that it's wrong to be offended by it. I think that it's perfectly natural to to have that sense of why are you questioning this thing that I truly believed and might have had a difficult time coming out of? It feels like a cop-out too, right? It's not intellectually honest. So if you're coming to a debate or a conversation with the goal of actually communicating with somebody and having this talk, and they just throw this out, it is a very clear sign, not only that they are calling into question, your ability to distinguish reality, but also they are not interested in having a real conversation with you. And that is also offensive if you are coming to the table with an open mind and a willingness to hear the other side.
Yeah, that's very true. Like I definitely feel like it's a bit of a cop-out kind of response that people give, because it's just so,
absolutely.
I don't know, it is a gaslighting thing. That I think that's probably why it feels so offensive to me, because it's like you're telling me what I do and don't think.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess that also what you said before about how it's so hard to come out of and how you give up stuff when you're part of it and that. And it's like, so you're telling me I did all that and it was for nothing because
it didn't count for some reason. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Yeah. Well, I hope this helped. Is this going to give you a little bit of a guideline for future conversations about this, or at least help alleviate the feelings of discomfort afterwards?
Yeah, definitely. I just I was so stuck on this because I was like, how do you respond to something like that when it's like when people say something that you can't falsify anything against, like they just make a claim and you can't even start, begin. And so I'm just like, that will definitely help me in the future.
Good. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for calling in, Rachel, and for calling from
thanks, Rachel.
Australia. I'm so happy we got to take your call.
I know it's really early in the morning over here. So I'm a really big fan of the show and I'm really glad I got to be on. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks, Rachel.
Well, have a lovely rest of your day.
Yeah, you too.
That was a good way to start off, I think, because it is a question that a lot of deconverted Christians have to deal with, and probably not just Christians. I'm sure that this spans other religions as well. You're not truly of the faith if you leave it.
You're not a true believer, regardless of what faith or religion you come from, right? You were never really a good, real, true one of us sort of thing. It's like they already cast you aside with that statement. It's like, well, thanks a lot.
Right. How am I supposed to have a conversation with you if you've already relegated me to this out group that you don't need to listen to?
Exactly.
Yep. All right. Let's take a call from Hadisoufi from North Carolina. Hello. Can you hear us?
Hey. Yeah. Hey, guys. How's it going?
It's going good. What can we help you with today?
Well, I'm a Muslim, and I've seen your show a couple of times, and I got to say I'm really impressed by the kind of attitude that you take to your faith. And I wanted to open with kind of an idea that occurred to me. So as a person of faith and as a person who's really passionate about the sciences, I kind of see two ideas of God in the world. There's the kind of truly creative, omnipotent God that we theists kind of believe in, or at least us Abrahamic theists kind of believe in. And then there's more the sort of living idea of God that actually exists in the world, that exists in the same way that democracy exists or, philosophy exists. And so, talking with my atheist friends, I kind of see why the idea of a truly omnipotent, unprovable God is unappealing. But for me, even if that wasn't the case, the kind of more functional day-to-day God still works for me. And that's kind of where I wanted to start off this conversation.
Interesting. Okay. So I've definitely given this some thought as well, the difference between an existent God, one that actually physically or, metaphysically exists. And then the one that is the concept of God, right? In the same way that we have a concept of Harry Potter or James T. Kirk, right? The character itself doesn't exist, but we couldn't deny that people know who this character is and have conversations, including the character and all of this. Is that kind of where you're going with this?
Exactly.
Okay. So I guess my first question to you would be, why would you value a conception of God if you don't necessarily, could you value the conception of God if you didn't believe that the true existing God existed? Like, where do you find that distinction?
That's a really tough question, honestly. And it's not something that I had considered, but just kind of going off the top of my head.
Yeah.
Being kind of part of an organized religion and engaging with God in that sense is a useful thing just by itself. It's a built-in community all the way around the world. It's, spiritual peace. It's, family. It's culture. It's heritage. All these other good things that, that we all do appreciate about religion. And this might be getting a little bit abstract, but I do think that that sort of character of God does act in a way, right? Like in the same way that you can say that capitalism or perhaps democracy has real effects on the people who exist when they come into contact with those ideas, you can say that God does the same thing. That sort of living idea of God does the same thing. Am I making sense here, or am I like totally going crazy?
No, I think it's a good question to ask, and a good thesis to kind of start from. My counter would be, we all acknowledge that there is no democracy out there in some kind of metaphysical space watching us, right? Yeah. So like when we talk about the existence of concepts like democracy, like any ism that exists, we are acknowledging that there isn't, for the most part, we're acknowledging that there isn't some personified version of that exists outside of us that is influencing our actions or expecting anything of us. So if I were to say that, sure, God conceptually exists, why would that have any bearing on whether or not God truly exists?
That's what I was
so I guess that for you, that's kind of the sticking point, right? I guess to me, it doesn't really matter if God, like as a creator, exists.
Okay.
Oh, interesting.
If he does, he's so far removed, clearly, from day-to-day existence that
I would agree with that.
It might as well not be there at all. Or he acts in a way that's so mysterious that we can't properly perceive him. And that's pretty obvious. I mean, people have tried for millennia to objectively prove the existence of gods, and seems like they've failed. So whether or not he's actually real seems to be kind of immaterial as much as practicing faith in him would. I'm kind of losing the words here, but do you see what I'm saying?
I think so. Yeah. Neil, do you have something to say here?
It almost sounds to me like you're almost sitting on the fence nowadays about whether or not the existence of God is a thing. So where exactly are you on that point right now? Do you still consider yourself to be quite faithful and religious and stuff like that? Or are you kind of having questions these days?
No, I do. My family are Sufis, and as Sufis, we take not just the last name, but like literal Sufis. Sure. And we take a very mystical approach to God. God is kind of an ever-present all-powerful, all-existing being. There's no separating us from God. We are him in a literal sense just as much as he is us, but we're kind of infinitely small parts of an infinitely large field that is God. There's not, to conceive of God properly in his existence is impossible simply because we are such small echoes of his true being. So when I consider him in that way, it almost seems like there are more useful things that I could be doing with my time than wondering about his motivations and, my place in the universe to him.
Sure. I agree.
Okay. Well, my question then is, what makes this conceptual God and religions based on the concept of God better than other concepts that bring people together in community across the world? So it seems to me like what you're saying is that a true God may exist, may not exist. That's not really important to the conversation. The conversation should be, is religion beneficial to humanity? Is the way that we conceptualize and bring about ideas of a deity or the supernatural, that is kind of where the important conversation lies. And your argument is that it is beneficial because of community, because of family, because of culture. But there are religions even that benefit people in those ways that don't rely on God belief, right? And there are communities that are built on holy material and non-mystical concepts as well. So I guess my question would be, what differentiates the benefits from believing in a conceptual God versus believing in something else that also provides these benefits?
Sure. Well, that's a great point, and thank you for taking the time to try and parse out what I'm saying. I know I can get kind of messy when I talk sometimes. So then
I think this is a good convo so far.
Me too. So I think that as a Muslim, it should be pretty obvious when I say that I feel like Islam is the best religion. And I say that not just because of, the fact that these are my people. I was raised among Muslims. My family are all Muslims. I love them to death.
Sure.
But this is also from what I've seen when I try to step back a little bit and I look at the behavior of my people. I see that we behave in moral ways. I see that, we do good works, that we are kind to one another and we care for one another. And when I've been to other communities, of course, this is just me, right? This is all just anecdotes. I don't know if there is any objective way of measuring this stuff, but I see Muslims as some of the best people that I know. And so when I take that perspective, it seems like Islam is probably the best religion for me and just generally, in my opinion. So that's kind of the basis of my perspective.
Oh, sure. Let's not forget that you were also born into and raised in the faith as well, too, right?
Oh, well, sure. But I was also raised in the U.S. And as a U.S. citizen, I went to public school. My grandparents are Christian. My mom's a convert. I've been to church more times than I can, care to remember.
Care to remember.
Look, I didn't have a great time
me too,
at church,
man.
all right?
Yeah, we're all in the same boat there.
Yeah, I've been there myself. I was raised as a Jew. I was actually born to Christians, but my father's mother, who was a staunch Catholic, she didn't even know I existed until the year 2000, because they had hid the whole fact that I was even alive from her, because she, it's very, very outside marriage, sex thing, not a good thing. So I was put up for adoption, and I was raised as a Jew. So I always kind of had that question in the back of my mind, if this deity or God or Yahweh or Allah or whatever you want to call him had this great plan, and according to the Christians that I knew, that I should be following Jesus, then why would he have me be born to Christians and then be raised as a Jew who don't believe in Christ? That's kind of a crazy kind of plan, or some backwards ass way of trying to get me to get there. So that's one of the things that made me think about the whole existence of God or anything like that. So for myself anyways. And I'd had questions ever since I found that out.
Makes sense.
Do you mind if I engage with that idea for a minute, if that's not too personal?
Sure. No, not at all. Feel free.
As you know, this is one of those questions that a lot of theists and atheists come back to, like, why is life so crazy if there's a plan? And I feel like that's definitely more of a question that troubles Christians and a question that troubles Muslims, because for us, we're not, the whole point is the hereafter, right? We're judged based on the choices we make with the options that we have in front of us. If the only choice you're ever allowed to make is between killing 2 people and killing 10 people, killing 2 people would be considered a good choice in that context. It's, from our perspective, it's a very pragmatic, we're a very pragmatic religion. We're more concerned with doing your best than being perfect and being absolutely moral in all circumstances. So,
right. I was going to jump in there. Yeah.
Oh,
okay. So I'm fascinated by this. Do you mind if we jump on that a little bit?
No, let's do it.
Yeah.
Okay. So my question for you, after your description of why you think Islam is the best religion and the best option for building community and family and culture, my thought was, okay, well, that all sounds very valid to you because that is your experience. But I could say that in my experience, secular humanists are the best people I've engaged with and the ones who act the most moral in my conception, and the ones who are doing the most good for the world. And I'm not necessarily saying that, but I could. In which case it feels like we're a little bit at a stalemate where we're both saying, well, my way is best because of what I've experienced of my way. And so my question becomes, that feels like a very pragmatic view of all of this. And it doesn't necessarily get us to truth, because we couldn't obviously come to an objective truth based on personal experiences that conflict, right? So my question is, are you concerned about the truth of this claim, of the claims that Islam makes, or are you more concerned about the pragmatic results of that faith?
So that's a really great question, first of all. And I'd like to kind of take 2 approaches to it. So the first thing that I would say is that I was having a really involved discussion about a similar topic with a close atheist friend of mine. And he mentioned that the way I describe Islam sounds an awful lot like secular humanism. So from just, that's more of a side thing. I don't think that really addresses the point that you're trying to make. And so if I'm understanding you correctly, you're saying that anecdote is kind of an inherently flawed way of judging the world. Am I right?
Well, it's flawed if the goal is to get to an objective truth. If the goal is to relate your story and your experience, then anecdote is the perfect way to do that. But in this call, I feel like what we're trying to get to is some conception of truth. And in that way, anecdote doesn't necessarily cut it. Because your anecdote could contradict my anecdote. And then we're at a stalemate.
Right. And our anecdotes are, of course, equally valid since we're both equally human. So the only there's kind of 2 ways around that from there. And the first way is to have historians and philosophers and people who study these kinds of things professionally go ahead and do some kind of massive meta-analysis of these various philosophies and see, which one has done the most good for the world. And I don't think that's going to get us to the objective, true truth of how functional these things are, because of course, each group is going to thrive under certain circumstances and fail under other circumstances. It would be a really, really huge, complicated undertaking.
Yes, it would.
I would argue that this is what, interfaith discussions have been about for the last couple hundred years, like trying to figure out who's got the most righteous approach, to put it in more religious terms. But then barring that, because obviously that's not possible in the limited time that we have, I would say that the objective truth matters sometimes more than other times, right? Like when you're just talking to your friend and your friend's feeling down and you're just listening. Does the objective truth of what they're saying matter as much as being supportive to them? Or for instance, when you find yourself walking down the street, right, there's an old lady, so you help her across the street. you don't know if that old lady is secretly like, I don't know, old lady Hitler. That's the objective truth, but we can never truly know the objective truth anyway. We're always limited by hard Catholicism. So you do your best with what you have, right? And I do genuinely believe that we will never have the truth. I believe that we will get very close to truth. I believe that there are tools like science and like philosophy that help us get close to the truth, and we'll be able to get much closer to the truth in 200 years than we will today. But I really don't think that our brains are capable of understanding everything, you know?
I agree with that. Yeah, I guess my only caveat to that would be I would agree to an extent that objective truth matters more sometimes than others. And let's take your example of consoling a friend, right? If what your friend is saying is wrong and that is a threat to her soul or the threat to her ability to exist in a paradise like afterworld or potentially be I'm not sure what Sufis believe about hell or non-existence afterwards. I think that would actually be a very good time to bring up objective truth. So I agree that in certain circumstances, objective truth might not be as important as a listening ear or fanciful explorations of philosophy, but in matters of an afterlife, in matters of constructing our existence on Earth for a purpose beyond Earth, especially one that has such high stakes, I would say that objective truth is very important there. Wouldn't you agree?
Mm-hmm.
Well, yes and no. Yes and no. In Islam, and you guys have heard this on the news a dozen times. You've heard the word Sharia, right?
Mm-hmm.
I already know it. I'm sure some of the listeners are kind of shaking their heads right now. Look, what you hear on the news about Sharia is not what Sharia is. Sharia literally means heavenly law. It's the rules that God wrote down way up in heaven, said this is how you're supposed to lead your lives, right? Okay, this is a pretty basic concept. I think all the Abrahamic faiths have an idea of it. So the Quran, as it was handed down to Muhammad, and Muhammad's life itself, for us, these are the lenses through which we try to discover Sharia, right? We don't know it. We don't have it. God, in his infinite wisdom, decided not to give it to us and to have us figured out on our own. So we do our best, right? And in Islam, in Islamic scholarship specifically, there's a very common saying. It at the end of every work of scholarly discourse, it always ends with Allah knows best, which means that we are trying our damnedest with what we have, but we could be wrong. And so Allah knows best is a way of saying, please forgive us for our mistakes. We're only human. We're doing our best with what you gave us. And so as Muslims, we trust that Allah is aware of our context and aware of our own flaws, and we trust that he'll judge us with those in mind.
Okay, but let's take that concept and run with that a little bit.
Sure.
The way that you describe yourself and the way that you describe your view of a religion, especially if you've talked with your atheist friends and they've described it very similarly to secular humanism, it seems to me like we would probably align on a lot of stuff. Not necessarily supernatural stuff, but, day to day, be nice to other people, respect other individuals as equally human, all of that. But there are some versions of every religion, Sharia included, that go in a very opposite direction and take the same, they have that different context, like you're saying, but they're taking the same book, the same lenses, and interpreting it in frankly, a very harmful way. So when we give this over this, okay, well, it's a religion. It's our attempt at interpreting the will of God, and we can only know as much as we can based on this lens. To me, that feels like validating a group of people who shouldn't be validated, right? So how do you get around the no true Muslim fallacy here, where your Sharia might be very secular humanist, very aligned with a lot of Western values in some sense. But also there are other people who are interpreting the same book, the same scripture in a very harmful way, both here and elsewhere. So I guess that's where the truth claim comes in for me. That's why the truth claim is important, because if we have no other way to distinguish who is true than what their personal morality tells them, then it seems like it's kind of a free-for-all, and we don't have a valid way of saying that's wrong, you shouldn't do that.
Well, I think that's a really good point. And, of course, as a Muslim, as all Muslims in the U.S. know, this is a question we get posed a lot by the media, by strangers on the street, by close friends and family. It's a question we ask ourselves all the time, right? And what it comes down to really is, holding off on your question about what actually determines the objective truth of things, because that's a much deeper question. The way that the way that I was always taught to kind of approach it is like, look at what the Prophet ﷺ actually did, right? If these people are acting in the way that he acted, then maybe they have something about them. If they're not acting in the way that he acted, then they're probably wrong. His acts are called, the collection of his acts is called Sunnah. That's his character. And it's recorded in the form of the short sayings and stories called Hadith. And so that's how we kind of filter the entire religion, right? We don't just read the Quran and say, okay, if the Quran says this, then we do that. No, we start with what would the Prophet do? And then we work backwards. So when we talk about ISIS or Al-Qaeda, for instance, these guys they're just simply not acting in the way that the Prophet would condone. We have records of him explicitly condemning the things, or things like the things that they're doing. And so that's how we know. He is kind of our objective truth, although I'm sure that's he's about as close to the objective truth as we have on Earth.
Well, I have a question.
Well, yeah, go for it, Neil.
I was going to ask, you were talking about ISIS and Al-Qaeda, and they feel that they're the best examples of Muslims, I guess, that follow the book as well. So how do you, because I'm sure they believe that what they're doing is what is wanted, I guess, or what is expected. So how do you deal with that sort of thought? Because you obviously are a much better person than these folks that are representing that side of it. So how do you guys determine which of you is actually doing the right work, so to speak?
Well, again, we look at the Hadith, we look at the Sunnah of the Prophet, and these guys. Look, I'm going to be honest with you. I'm not a scholar of Al Qaeda's philosophy or ISIS's philosophy. Sure. Mm-hmm. Sure. I'm pretty sure, and you are going to have to take this with a grain of salt. I'm pretty sure these guys are Wahhabis or Wahhabi descendants. The Wahhabis do not use the Sunnah. They are Quran literalists, and if Bible literalists and Quran literalists have anything in common, they're completely crazy. And
well,
this is...
I don't want to say crazy,
one of the ways that we can tell.
They've definitely been guided down a wrong path, that's for sure, even based on
and I do want to stress that this is a thing that is consistent across religions, right? No matter what the religion is, there are going to be extremists, and there are going to be people who are more progressive, and there are going to be fundamentalists and people who, focus on certain parts and other parts. A great example of this is there are some people who tell me that Jesus is all about love and acceptance and peace. And then there are other people who point to things like, fashioning a whip and chasing people out of the temple, and saying, "I do not bring peace but a sword." And so there are ways to interpret any book based on what you're looking for. And so I guess my final thought here, and we will have to resume this later. I would love to have you call back. Is
conversation.
This again gets right down to why I think objective truth, or at least a way of fashioning, reaching objective truth in a way that can bring people who are not already sold on a preconception, is so important. So you can say the prophet is the most the closest to objective truth that we can get, and that's all well and good until you try and talk with me, who frankly has very little idea about any of that and has not yet heard a convincing argument for any kind of God as an objective source of truth. So for me, my question for next time maybe is, let's run with that. Let's run with, you make the claim that the prophet, I believe is what you called him, is the most objective source of truth to your best understanding. So maybe call in next time with some arguments for that and see if there's a way that we can reach a common ground about why we think that is.
Also,
I
one
would
little...
love to. And I'll go ahead.
I was just going to, a little quick sort of thing. Remember as well that you've got good and bad people, no matter where they are and what their beliefs are. And it can take a bad ideology to make an otherwise good person do bad things. So, you got to keep that in mind as well. So I understand that you are probably one of the best examples of a Muslim that there are out there, because you seem like a pretty decent human being, man. So keep that up.
Thanks. That's very kind of you. Do you mind if I say something to the audience real quick?
That depends. Let's start, and we'll either let you go or we'll drop you.
Sounds good. So to everybody listening, I realize that Muslims are in the news. We've been in the news, and you hear a lot about our extremists and what these guys are not. You find extremists everywhere. They're a product of strife, and whether or not atheists or atheists, it's not right to discriminate against anybody. And it's best to take an approach. These guys are evil. They're doing horrible things, but the harm they do are things that are being done to them. They're just perpetuating a cycle of violence. So please keep that in mind. Be kind to your neighbors. And I would love to speak with y'all next week if you have me.
Yeah, definitely call back. Thank you so much.
Sad I won't be here, but it was nice to talk to you.
Nice to talk to you too.
Okay, so this is, I think, the primary difference between me and my approach to this and some of the other people who are at the ACA. I much prefer this kind of conversation where we can get to know the other person really well, as much as we can in the short amount of time, and see if we can find people who are decent, honest, good people who disagree with us, and then get to the bottom of why. We could have very easily gone in for certain, very, very standard jabs at Islam, about Muhammad, about Muslims. And I don't want to do that because, first of all, it is perpetuating a specific kind of discrimination when all religions hold these things to be problematic, or hold these problematic things. But also, that wouldn't have got us to where we were, which is probably he's going to call back in next week, and probably we're going to be able to continue this conversation. So
I think it's good that we talk to folks and reach each other's humanity rather than our belief systems, right? And if you got that foundation where you're talking to each other like we're two human beings or three human beings or four human beings that are sharing this planet, and we have that connection that way, and we can talk about all the stuff that's around that connection, and hopefully our conversations can go, decently. Anyways, they don't always, but I think I try, and I know that you try as well, V, to have those conversations be, amicable rather than confrontational.
Yes, exactly. That's my preference. And there are people who do things in other ways, which are also cool. All right.
I don't always keep my cool, I admit that. But.
It depends, and we'll get into that in a minute, because we are going to be talking to Kevin in New York. Kevin, hello. Can you hear us?
Hello.
Hi,
Kevin.
Hello again, Kevin.
Quick little side note.
Yeah.
That was going to be my name if my Christian folks had kept me. It was going to be Kevin.
So we've got 2 potential Kevins up in here. Okay, so Kevin,
Okay, cool.
we need to find some kind of prize to send you. You've called 10 times, it sounds like.
Oh, wow.
So this is impressive. You are a valued customer. So what can we help you with this week?
Well, I've got another theory for you out there. It has to do with the scriptures of the Bible and Jesus' life and something called the Peter principle. Now the reason before I even the Peter principle. Now this is just a study of work from someone else, but the reason why I'm going to talk about this is to try to get you to a point to think about to rethink the validity of the Bible.
But before we get into that, Kevin, though, I mean, I do want to get to that, and I appreciate you calling in with a theory. I'm curious about the Ouija boards and the wormwood and the pineal gland. Where are you with those?
I was talking about that with somebody last night.
Are those discarded at this point? Did we disprove those sufficiently? Are those still things that you carry with you? Because at this point, it would be dishonest of me to pretend like we had never heard of each other before, or that there isn't this backstory where you call in with a theory, and they're always fascinating, which is why I love these calls. But more than that, more than the theories themselves, I'm fascinated by you and why you gravitate towards these kinds of theories and what roles they play in your life. How do you do this research? How do you come up with these theories?
Well, that's a difficult question to answer. I do a lot of my own research. I try my very best not to be influenced by anyone else. And it takes a whole lot of reading. But those things that you mentioned earlier, I still do carry them with me. And it's not something, well, I mean, you guys brought up a lot of points in previous calls, but the reason why I haven't thrown them away is, well, there's still a whole lot of information that, well, I wasn't even able to get to that I still hold on to as well.
Right.
But
so that's good to know. I think one thing that we might try in the future is, instead of coming up with something else to talk about, we circle back and we give you that opportunity to tell us a little bit more about what you read and what you weren't able to get to in the other calls. So that might actually help us get a little bit deeper and find a little bit more common ground there. Do you agree?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I can do that. I can change subjects really quickly, actually, because I have actually been wanting to call back into something I called in about a long time ago.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's up to you. We can talk about the Peter principle, which sounds intriguing, and leave this a continuation of conversations for next time, or we can kind of pull a 180 and pick up a past call. What do you feel like doing today?
That's a really good question. I'll continue to talk about the Peter principle and Jesus' life.
Okay, perfect. But can we agree that next time you call in, we pick one that we've already talked about and continue it?
All right, absolutely.
Cool, perfect. All right, we're on the same page. Let's go.
All right. Well, the Peter principle it is a study in which it says that it's a key to unlocking parables within the Bible.
Okay.
Well, like one of the simple ones is that everyone understands that Jesus is inevitably translated in the language of parables as the Word. but he's not the only one in the Bible that this can be done with in order to further understand it. And
so, just for our for our
that's
viewers who might not know, that would be interpreted as like in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, and the Word was with God. And you're saying that the word in parable there is actually Jesus in real life.
yes, absolutely.
Okay.
But it's actually literally meant both. That's the significance of it. But anyway, the Peter principle. Now, the reason why I get to this is because the word Peter was not originally the disciples' name, but it was actually Simon. But when Simon approached Jesus, he was given the name Peter because the name Peter means a rock.
I will build my church upon this rock.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I know the verse.
Knowing this, we can actually change whenever we see in the Bible the name Peter, we can replace with the church. It's not
I disagree with that. I don't think that's accurate. Because here we go. Here's a. Okay, I wake up and I call my little sibling and I say, "Good morning, you are my sunshine," right? I call my little sibling my sunshine. Does that mean that every time anybody references my sibling, they mean literal sunshine? Like, we can have a metaphor or a parable in one place, but just because we've used words, we've paired words in one context doesn't mean those words are always going to be paired. That would make things very confusing. So do you do this with other books too, like Lord of the Rings? Do you read other books where one metaphor then extends throughout the entire novel?
Well, no, this works in a different sense because when there were conversations going on between Jesus and Simon, who Jesus named Peter, not only was Jesus directly talking to him, but he was also making prophecies for the church during that time, well into the time that we're living in.
How do you know that?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say or ask.
Well, when you replace the name Peter with the church in the Bible, you come to understand this. Like, for example, the scriptures itself confirm this in the story that the story of Jesus walking on water. Now, when this is from Matthew 14:22-33, when Jesus told his disciples to get into a ship and go to the other side, and he sent the multitudes away. Now, that itself in parable meaning was, that is to say that the body of believers would have to venture into the future without the tangible experience of Jesus' presence along the way.
Well, that's certainly one interpretation of it.
Yeah.
But why is this something that would convince me of the validity of the Bible, and not just that you have a different reading of it than I might have heard before?
Well, working with these same tools and the same story, Jesus walking on the water, you could also say that the Word was above the nations of the world because the sea represents the nations of the world.
Oh, geez, I've heard that one before. So when Moses parts the Red Sea, is that also talking metaphorically? Did that not actually happen?
I think it is taken both literally and metaphorically.
Woof, that's a mind
Okay.
trip. So you're saying that everything in the Bible is at once wholly metaphorical and also really happened.
Yes.
Wow. Okay. Oh, that's a big claim.
That is.
Because,
Neil, do you have questions for Kevin?
Well, so many, but where to start?
the reason why I say that the sea represents the nations of the world, because Psalms 65:7 illustrates this by saying, which still is the noise of the seas, the noise of their waves, and the tumult of the people. Now,
it couldn't have meant that people were standing near the water and both were happening at the same time.
I'm sorry, say that again?
Well, the way that psalm sounds more to me like there are a bunch of people shouting next to an ocean, and he wants both of them to shut up. Why is that not an accurate interpretation of that? Why does that have to mean that people mean water and water mean people, and throughout the Bible, that's just how that goes?
Well, that verse is just referring to words of mankind. That's why it represents the nations of the world and different denominations and so on and so forth.
Okay. So I'm still waiting for the part where this proves the validity of the Bible. Right now, I'm hearing that there are a lot of metaphors that you're reading into things, and that's very easy to do. I believe it was Sam Harris who walked through a bookstore, picked a random cookbook, and created an entire religion out of the metaphors that he read in the recipes. It's very, very easy, especially if you've been, immersed in a text, to find metaphor in it. That's what AP Lit classes are all about, right? You find metaphor about why the curtains are blue in this scene, and why, F. Scott Fitzgerald called New York sugar cubes instead of something else. And it's fun. It's fun, and it can feel very profound in the moment when you make that connection. But ultimately, that's you making the connection between things you think about and things you read. And that's your prerogative, and you are free to do that. But I don't see how that proves anything to me, who hasn't made those connections and don't think those metaphors are anything more than subjective.
Well, in a much larger sense, when Jesus was talking to Peter, in a much larger sense, all the parables, when they were understood, he was prophesying how the church would deny the church itself, even though they're teaching these things, would come to deny the things that they're teaching up until the time that we're living in. That's why we get strange things like Jesus asking Peter to feed his sheep asking Peter, do you love me? 3 times, and then say to feed his sheep as a response to what Peter says afterwards. But
Neil, what were you gonna say?
It's all prophecies as well. So that's why I.
Wow. So wait, it's literal, it's metaphor, and it's prophecy.
Prophecies are easy to write about after the fact.
They're especially easy to read into, to create prophecy afterwards. Neil, I think you had a question for Kevin, though.
I did. Have you ever discussed this with another theist, another believer? And I kind of wanted to know if anyone has ever said to you that you're reading this stuff and interpreting it incorrectly, as opposed to how they feel about the scriptures.
I haven't discussed it with anybody, unfortunately. Probably because I just haven't had time, but I'm still in the process of reading all this. Now, the only frustration is that my brain can't contain all the information that I need to, but
and I feel you there.
I still find it significant.
Oh, that's not the issue here, though. I acknowledge that you find significance in it. Like, that's very clear to me. What I don't understand is why you finding significance in a text says anything to me about why I should find significance in a text. I personally think that Lord of the Rings is the best book ever written. And yes, it was one book. It was split into 3 because paper rationing during the World War. So
that's right.
Don't at me. But my question for you is, okay, you think this is very symbolic. You think that these are metaphors. You also think that these are prophecies. You've done some reading that makes you think this. Why? What can you give me the sources that you are citing so that I can also do this research? Or do you have some kind of argument to make me feel more like you have some sort of objective grasp of this as opposed to just your opinion, man?
Well, it's subjective anyways.
I can give you a source. Some of this information I'm giving you is from an author named Robert C. Farrell. And you would have to listen to a video of his called The Guidebook of the Elect. Now, it has to do with something that I've called in before, in which now people have got to understand, people who are believers, that they believe that there's going to be a second coming of Jesus, but if
it's already supposed to have happened, if I remember correctly.
Mm-hmm.
He was supposed to come back in the time of his apostles or whatever.
Well, that did happen, but it still happened in such a way to where they didn't believe that it actually happened.
Okay, so here's a question for you, because that's a really good point, Neil. I'm still working through this whole literal metaphor prophecy thing. So Jesus told his disciples point blank that they would be alive when he returned. Now, that cannot both be literal and prophecy, right? So that could either be he's talking metaphorically and his returning is a metaphor for something else, in which case it's not literal. Or it could be a prophecy that his disciples maybe means the church later on, and that if the church survives long enough, he will come back. That's a prophecy, but that's not literal. Or it could actually mean that he is coming back and his disciples are going to see him again before they die. That would be literal, but that would also be false because that didn't happen. So in this one instance, I don't see how it can be all 3 things. Can you walk me through why you think it can be literal, prophecy, and metaphor all at once? Or if not, where you think the distinction is between determining what is literal and what is metaphor and what is prophecy?
Well, it also says in the scriptures that the kingdom of God is both within and above. And that's why it was also said that it was important for one person to get to know themselves. But when it comes to Jesus' disciples and Jesus saying that this generation wouldn't pass away before seeing the coming of the kingdom, that was because redemption was set forth during their lifetimes, in which they would have inner peace. Inner peace is a part of the kingdom of God that he was talking about.
So the kingdom of God means inner peace. I've got inner peace. Does that mean that we can call off the apocalypse and the end of the world isn't happening because, hey, we've got it. It came, it showed up.
No. No,
okay.
Not at all.
So where are we differentiating between the kingdom of heaven meaning inner peace, and the kingdom of heaven meaning an actual descent into Earth's atmosphere from on high.
Well, because like it goes back to the story that I was trying to tell you about Jesus walking on the water, and how it's supposed to be an example for the church to not be caught up in worldliness, or else they'll sink into the sea, which is the nations of the world.
Can you sink into a nation?
Into a sea? Can a nation sink into a sea?
It says the sea is representing the nations of the world. And Peter representing the church, when he got out of the boat to walk towards Jesus on the water, he became afraid, because when he saw the intense wind and the high waves, which represents the backlash of tradition. And
wait, okay.
Wait.
Where'd you get that one from? No.
Yeah.
Okay. Look, here, Kevin, let me explain kind of where I'm having a problem with this. Let's take that story. Let's take that parable, right? But I'm going to say that the water represents financial instability, and Jesus represents a full-time job, and I am Peter, and I just got out of the boat that is grad school. And I am struggling with financial insecurity, and I'm going to sink, and oh no. And then here comes Jesus, and Jesus is personifying a full-time position that gives me stability and the ability to work and make money and be self-sufficient. And so I need to keep my eyes on that full-time job and continue pursuing it so that I don't fall into the ocean of bankruptcy or what have you. That to me is my interpretation of that story. Let's say. What makes your interpretation better than my interpretation?
Good question.
Well, this is where I would say that it's not up to us to determine it, but this is why I'd like to say that we get the validity of the scriptures from itself, and that the interpretation.
Wait, we have a book that is founded on metaphor, and it's not up to us to interpret it? How are we supposed to interpret a metaphorical text if we're not allowed to interpret it? Either it's literal and it's not up to us and we need to follow it by the letter, or it's not literal and it's metaphorical, in which case it is up to us to interpret it. And that's why we have as many denominations as we have. That's why we're having this conversation right now. So again, it can't be both.
And how do you know you interpreted it correctly, Kevin?
Exactly. That is the main point. Thank you, Neil.
You're correct, because now when I say that it's literal, metaphorical, and prophecy, I'm just referring to the New Testament.
We were talking about the Old Testament a minute ago, and you pulled it from Psalms. You pulled that explanation about the water being a crowd from Psalms. Psalms isn't in the New Testament.
That's Old Testament. The Psalms also has the one about dashing infants against rocks and stuff like that. So in the Psalms.
Now the Old Testament itself should be just taken metaphorically, because the author of the Old Testament was Moses.
Whoa. Okay, I was raised Jewish. I grew up with the Old Testament. I was never told to take it metaphorically. I was told, even by my rabbis and stuff at the time, that it was the inerrant word of God, which I always had questions with even back then. But anyways, that's what I was told. So now you're telling me that I should have just accepted it as metaphor?
Yes, in a certain sense, yes. Because
oh my gosh, Neil, you were so wrong. You and this ancient religion of yours.
Because a lot of the stories in the Old Testament shows how God's people had fallen into trouble because they weren't listening to the law. And
did you hear my earlier comments to the last caller at all, Kevin? About being born to Christians but yet given up for adoption and raised Jewish. So I guess maybe now either God put me with the correct people, or he didn't want me to follow Jesus. One or the other, right? If it's all going according to his plan, right?
No, not at all, because just like I was saying that Peter can be understood as the church, James can be understood in parable as the Jews.
Parable, okay.
There was significance of all of the 12 disciples.
There is what now?
Yeah, say that again.
There was parabolic significance for all the 12 disciples.
Okay.
So,
well, at this point,
there were other
Kevin, at this point, I feel like we're just going around and around. And you're saying, I'm seeing metaphor in here. And I'm saying, tell me why you're seeing metaphor and why it's a better metaphor than the one I'm using. And you say, it just is. God just meant it this way. And I just know it, which isn't convincing and doesn't really make for a good conversation. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move on for now, but I do want you to call back and we can choose to pick this up again or any of the other topics you've called about. But next time I'm laying down the law that it needs to be about something we've already discussed so that we can continue to dig down and have this conversation. Okay.
All right. But the next time I call, I guess I'll try to talk about the very first thing I ever called in about.
Oh, perfect. Is this the Ouija boards and the occult?
Oh, geez.
It was about the Book of Enoch and the concept of black hole.
That was you, wasn't it? All right,
hole.
Cool.
All
well, I will look forward to talking with you later.
Kind of wish you would have picked that one today, Kevin.
All right. Thanks, Kevin.
All right. Thank you. I'll try to.
Whoop. Hung up on him. Sorry, Kevin. Yeah.
He's all over the place, that guy, eh?
A little bit, yeah. Just a touch. But no, and here's the thing. I'm happy to talk with you as many times as you call in, as long as you're calling in good faith and want to have a conversation. And to my mind, Kevin doesn't strike me as a Poe, so we're good.
No, I think he just has all these little ideas and he might be confused on a few of them for sure.
Exactly. So definitely, if you're a repeat caller, taking a note from Kevin's book and making sure that we are continuing a conversation, ideally, as opposed to always starting a new one, because then we raise objections and never follow up, which isn't always that gratifying for us or for the viewers.
Or productive.
Exactly. So we are about 2/3 of the way through the show, and I do want to make sure that we, before we take more calls, shout out our top 5 patrons. These guys have been donating and giving us what we need to continue doing what we do, and we really, really appreciate you guys. So if you are interested in joining the ranks of these illustrious people who are generous and beneficent and more giving than any god I know of, feel free to go to patreon.com/Talk Heathen to me. All right. Thank you, Desert Heathen, Bethany P., The Barefoot Gardener, Ward, Charlotte, Patrick, and Jay Friedman. That's more than 5, but a lot of you paid the same amount, so I was going to lumping y'all together. Thank you so much, guys. We really appreciate all that you do, all that you give, and we're happy to be here with you today. All right. We've got 2 more theists on the line and then a couple of atheist calls that I do want to take as well. Neil, do you have a preference? The notion of supernatural experiences that show God exists, or God is the ultimate source of truth and we just don't acknowledge it?
You know what? Either one of those is a good topic. So I think we should flip a coin.
All right. I'm going to then go with the one who's been on the phone longer and talk with
heads it is.
Michael in Buffalo, New York.
Hey guys, good afternoon. How's it going?
It
Pretty
is
good,
going
Michael.
well.
How you doing?
What can we help you with?
Yeah. Well, you guys taught me something with the guy that just called in. I've been a Christian for about 15 years, and I forgot about this prophecy that Jesus was supposed to come back in the time of the disciples, and he never did.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So you're saying you're an atheist now?
No, because recently I took DMT. You ever see the Joe Rogan podcast?
Is it this guy? Oh, I've been told the legends of you, Michael.
comes into my chats quite often.
All
About
right.
that.
Well,
That's a different Michael. I wasn't in your chats or nothing.
Oh, okay. Because someone that
okay,
popped in there.
Neil, you just
exactly
attract
about that.
DMT users apparently.
I know, and I've never tried the stuff and don't really care to. So.
All right. Well, my Poe alert is on, just to let you know. But go ahead. Love to talk to you. DMT, continue.
Oh, this is more up my alley.
Okay, well, what was fascinating with DMT, like when you conduct experiments, you want them to be testable and you want them to be repeatable, and then you could come closer to the objective truth. Do I got that right a little bit there?
I think testable and repeatable are good things to start with. Yes.
As for truth, we can see at least where the evidence leads to, and consider that to be the truth until something throws that over.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, agreed. And what I find fascinating with this ayahuasca and DMT, there's something that's repeatable that's occurring, such as the mother ayahuasca coming to visit. And grant you, it is a hallucination, but it's a repeated hallucination that's occurring there.
Irrelevant.
And I find that a little fascinating.
It's fascinating, but it's also fascinating in the same way that people always have very similar alien abduction stories that we, have done some research in as well, where we found out that it's actually a form of sleep paralysis. And of course, our media culture imprints in our minds. So we already have the pictures of these alleged beings already in our minds, so we can form those pictures while we're endured in this, or while we're under this sleep paralysis thing. And of course, our fantasy, our TV, our movies all plays into that role, right? Because we have these little concepts already going in our minds. So when we end up with sleep paralysis, back in the day it was succubuses and incubuses, and now it's aliens, right?
Yeah.
So we're always going to have these sort of explanations.
Scary, that sleep paralysis.
Oh yeah, it is,
man.
I've dealt with it a few times. Yeah. But my point is, your drugs and all that stuff. Don't forget, you're talking about the human brain, and as soon as you alter it with some form of a drug, what's going to happen are going to be hallucinations. So we can pretty much determine that these aren't really reality that we're dealing with. These are the imagery and concepts and ideas that our brains are coming up with while under the influence of some sort of narcotic or hallucinogen.
Was someone else going to chime in, or?
No, I mean, I think that Neil's hit the nail on the head there. We have a culture that subconsciously we are consistently absorbing, and that information is then being used when we're under the influence. There was a caller who called in the other week who had a bad trip and prayed because they had grown up Christian and they felt a sense of peace during their trip after praying. And the realization that we came to as a group there was that because they were conditioned to associate prayer with a sense of peace, that they then called upon that in a state that was not fully conscious or fully aware. And it helped in the moment, which was cool, but that only speaks to what our brains are doing with the information that we absorb, not any kind of external truth. So,
well, yeah, that's awesome that you said that. That's an awesome point. But if you consider a pit viper, they're on a whole nother level of existence, aren't they? Flicking their tongue out, they're seeing things in a whole nother realm compared to humans.
Of course, and ants are different too.
Perhaps our brains have some type of a membrane that's blocking us from seeing what's occurring in another dimension.
What other dimension are you talking about? Like, I don't understand. What do you mean by other dimension?
My Little Ponies are flying around with wings, and
like Toontown at
playing the
Disneyland.
banjo.
Okay, so that's
we can actually
interesting. That's a claim. That is a claim. So perhaps, why should we take that perhaps as anything more than ooh, that would be cool. Next theory.
Well, that's a good point. I have a quick question. Like, what would you guys accept as proof of a supernatural experience? Say, for instance, us three are hanging out and no one's around, and we have a supernatural experience occur. We see a chair flip over and we hear laughing. How what's going to be proof here? If we videotape it, we could say that it's doctored. 3 people witnessed it. People could say that we're out of our minds or perhaps lying. How do we come up with proof that's valid?
See, that's the tricky thing, because
That's right.
by definition, the second that we can ground something in a testable and repeatable way, it then becomes part of nature, which denies it the supernatural element anymore. So supernatural literally just means, in all functional ways, the things that we can't test and prove yet.
Outside of nature.
Right. Yeah. So
and
for
also,
me, I would think I was being punked.
Yeah, that's gonna
but
yeah.
if because I worked in haunted inns, I grew up in a place where ghost tours and ghost walks and haunted buildings was a main source of commodity. So I know how one would punk in that way, and there are many people, you know, who are convinced by that.
I
But
be a ghost hunter myself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have friends who have some very interesting stories, and I can't explain them, but that doesn't mean I take them on face value. Right. So
figured out what they were. Yeah.
So my question, Michael, is we've kind of gone all over the place here. We called in starting to talk about DMT, and then we talked a little bit about membranes that block us from perceiving other dimensions, and now we're talking about the definition of the supernatural. So in the interest of time, let's wrap all this up into one thesis statement that you can do.
I want to know about the membrane thing, because that's the whole. I didn't know there were membranes in our. I had no idea. So
that's the membrane talking, Neil.
Well, how I
is that what the M and DMT stands for? Direct membrane translation. Is that what that is?
Oh, shit.
There you go.
Don't give him any ideas. I feel like that's something he's going to run with.
He's writing it down right now. Oh, I got some fuel for the fire.
Yeah, I'm writing it down. I'm writing it down.
All right. So, Michael, tweet length.
How I go about my life is, like, a lot of people I noticed on Facebook, they like to try proving their point when they debate people. And I go against that. Say I have a claim, what I do is I looked up the opposing claims first, and then I go to the things that I believe and agree with. But my thesis statement is, I don't know. I think that psychedelics kind of shows quantum physics a little bit.
You're starting to sound like Deepak Chopra, buddy. But I think
with this the word salad, right?
Well,
I mean, it's bordering on that a little bit. But even if we were to grant that was the case, which I know we're not granting, that still doesn't have anything to do with the supernatural, right? Quantum physics is still a component of the natural world. So how does that get us any closer to God?
Well, correlation is fascinating. We're all adults here. Like what's fascinating about the concept of correlation is say that I'm sexting someone, texting them, and if I'm not in the mood, the girl could sense it from 1,000 miles away. But what's funny
probably by the words you use.
Yes,
the existence of periods in text give a good indication. Yep, continue. Sorry.
And it's what's fascinating is when you become correlated, you feel the energy, and I think that some of I went off topic a little bit, but
what energy?
How does correlation have anything to do with the thesis about
There
DMT?
We go. Thank you. Quantum leaps, the concept
the TV show?
Traveling. No, the real definition, the literal definition of a quantum.
The real definition?
Yeah.
I think that's still an idea of science fiction, but I don't think no one's ever actually. I don't even. What is even a quantum leap?
With the double slit experiments, you guys are familiar with that, right?
Yeah, I'm well aware of that one. Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I think
that's not a quantum leap.
How our I know. It shows how our attention affects reality.
Yes, of course. That's one thing they've discovered.
Yeah.
Things will be different until you observe it.
But
right?
that's kind of supernatural, though. That's a little.
No, it's not. It's
right?
perfectly within the
No.
realm of quantum physics.
What do you define as supernatural? Because to us, that is just another. It's cool, and it's not something we fully understand yet, and that's awesome, and it's intriguing, and it gives me the same kind of spooky feelings. But is that how you're defining supernatural? Things that make you feel spooky?
Yeah, I think so. I think that, that would be
okay, cool.
What do you think about virtual particles? You think the whole the slit light thing experiment, whatever it's called, like it's not coming to me. What do you think about virtual particles that pop in and out of existence?
There you
all
go.
Random
That's
light,
a good.
right? Sure, but that's still within the realm of quantum physics. There's nothing supernatural about it.
But I'll tell you one thing: if you're under psychedelics, you could see those particles popping in and out of existence.
Sure, but now you're also on the influence of a narcotic or hallucinogen. So, yeah, I can see lots of things, including little pink elephants on unicycles.
I really hope that everything that one sees during a trip is not actually.
What about
real,
Fatima? Right,
that would be disturbing. Okay, Michael, I think we're going to move on for now. But that's it was a very interesting conversation, and I thank you for being chill and kind of laughing with us.
Yeah, that was good on you.
All right.
Okay. Have a nice
day. You brightened up my day. Bye now.
Awesome. Have a good day. Bye.
It's always good to hear. I try to be cordial, but like we were saying in messaging there, she's like, nothing wrong if you go beast mode. People get a kick out of that. So.
Oh yes, I just save it for very special occasions.
Yeah, no one's really brought me to that
My
level.
beast mode montage is going to be like 2 seconds. All right, let's go with Rick in Tennessee. Rick, can you hear us?
I can.
Okay.
How you doing, Rick?
Hello, guys.
Hello. What can we help you with today?
All right. I'm not sure if the call screener quite laid out what I was trying to say, but I don't know if I did to him either.
Okay, perfect. Well, let's start with a clean slate. What have you got for us?
I was saying I hope to be as chill as the last guy. I'm on DMT at the moment.
Are you serious?
That's not true.
I was going to say, we finally have someone who admits it.
No. What the topic I was trying to say is that what I want to try to convey is my understanding of what I believe to be the ultimate self, which I also see as a potential way to I'm sorry?
What is the ultimate self?
All
exactly.
Right. So
I don't know how to be more than who and what I am right now. So that's kind of what I want to know.
Okay. All right. I think I could explain that.
Okay.
I hope to.
We're all ears.
All right. Go for it.
Okay, what I mean by that, the ultimate self being the us that we really are, not our perspective, not our perceptions.
Okay.
Isn't that part of who we are?
Yeah, I'm curious how you would how would you differentiate between your perception and who you really are?
Our perception is what we have our information with. So, and that makes up parts and bits and pieces of who we are. We filter some out, we absorb and use some, right? So.
Sure, I understand your understanding of that, and I share that understanding. But when I say ultimate self, I'm saying the self before the perceiving. I'm sorry, the perceiving and not the perception. The perceiver and not the perception. The perception is the translation.
How do you differentiate that? Like,
this feels very like existentialist. Are we talking about?
Yeah, it probably is. It probably is. First of all, I'll say I watch the show all the time, and I also consider myself an atheist to any God I've ever heard of.
Oh,
interesting.
Awesome. Okay, but you've traveled down this path, and I'm kind of interested how you got there.
Yeah. So why? Okay, so we're defining our ultimate self as the perceiver and not the perception. So essence and being, basically.
That's what I would say too.
Essence and being is a potential way of saying it. Being, okay. Okay, this is so deep that it's shallow.
It's so deep it's gone all the way around and come up to the shallow end again.
Okay, hit me.
So this is both. This is both the deepest thing I can say and the most shallow thing I can say at the same time. I cannot perceive anything deeper than this, and I cannot perceive anything more shallow than this, depending on perspective.
Wait, what?
All right, what is it?
Okay, let's see if I can say this.
Okay.
I'll just speak for myself. What I am at any
speak for
given
anyone
moment.
else, so you might as well.
Correct. But I think we can possibly see this together. I believe what I am at any given moment, at the moment of being, not have been or will be, or not what has been perceived, but at the moment of perceiving, is essentially.
Wait, am I going to need a gummy bear for this?
If it's a DMT gummy bear, it would help.
No.
All right. So the sense of being in the moment and not in the past or future.
Correct. No. And so if we have an ultimate self, it wouldn't be tainted by anything like our own perceptions or our own limitations due to our understandings, or anything we've ever learned before, or anything that we already think, or any preconceptions or anything like that.
Why do you consider those being tainted? Why are those things bad, as opposed to an ultimate self, which is I'm assuming
not saying
good?
Tainted as in bad. I'm not saying tainted as in bad. I'm saying tainted as in like tinted. Tinted by, not
Got
tainted,
it. Got
not
it.
Tainted.
Got it. I like the number of times you're saying tainted. This is fun.
I don't understand.
Perceive. I'm sorry.
We are our experiences. We are all of that combined throughout our entire life.
Sure.
And we become more and more who we are as time goes on with new experiences that we absorb. That just becomes the new us, right? But we generally have a core, of stuff that we grew up with, and which makes us who we are, both experiential, learned, and otherwise. I mean, that's what makes us who we are. So I don't understand what you mean when you say ultimate self, because I feel like I'm my ultimate self every moment of every day as I go on throughout the day. I'm now the ultimate version of myself. Well, unless, of course, I'm like, dead tired or something because I had way too many beers the night before. But that's not my ultimate self when I'm hungover, that's for sure. But you understand what I mean? Like as we keep going, we are still our ultimate self because it's all the experience and all the learning and all the mingling with others that we've had up to that point. So we're always going to be our ultimate self, in one way or another.
Okay. Ultimate may be a word that I've chosen that may not quite fit the narrative.
Kind of sounds very William Lane Craigie to me. Maximally powerful. Like what?
Okay, well, what I'm trying to say is the essential self. By essential, I mean the one that we are at any given moment. The one that we are at the moment that we're in right now. You can look back into your mind. You can look back into your brain, your thinking, all that. You can relate with all that. But that isn't the actual you. That is the perceiver at the moment. That is what you do with the perceptions.
Okay, so am I talking to a very different Rick than the Rick that called in 2 minutes ago?
You are actually. Not very, but slightly.
No, because at that moment I was the perceiver, and at this moment I am the perceiver.
Yes, but you're now full of information you didn't have at the beginning of this call.
Right, we have a conversation going, which is necessary if we're... Sorry. Okay, so what I'm hearing is very much a call to existentialism, which is fine. I find that a fascinating topic philosophically, and I have Being and Nothingness on my dresser right now. But my question for you is, I love philosophical conversations. This is ultimately a show about what you believe and why, preferably with relation to a God claim. So we've gotten kind of the what, and now we need the why. You believe this. Why is this what you believe? And does this relate to a God somehow? Or wrap this up for us.
They said he was an atheist.
Okay, so to try to go to the God thing, well, I would say I'm an atheist in regard to any God that I've ever heard conveyed. in
Sure.
the way they're conveyed. I think they're all pointing to what I'm speaking of.
Do you think, do you believe in like a higher
maybe
power still, or what? Like,
I believe that, or I perceive that the moment of experience is the highest power. It is the only true power. It is the only thing that really exists at any given moment to any individual. Everything
what
else
about
exists
human power?
only in a shadow form, like a shadow of memory, a shadow of feeling, but not as in what is happening at this instant. It is a looking back. It is not an instantaneous experience. As our experience comes in, that is different than our filtering of it. Not again, but for the first time, it is like being at the event horizon of the mind.
The event. Ooh, I like that.
Not in the filter of the mind.
That is going to be the
looking
next
from the
Netflix
perspective-
documentary on DMT. It's going to be called The Event Horizon of the Mind.
Event horizon of the mind.
Right. Yeah, I knew DMT would get me here. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
I've never done it.
Yeah.
So,
Good.
Sounds interesting.
Yeah,
I mean,
but still
it
not
sounds
enough.
interesting, and it sounds very existentialist again.
Yeah, my sister did it. Actually.
Well,
So God is the
existential
present
might
moment.
be-
It also sounds rather like Buddhist.
We're always
too,
in the
a little
now,
bit.
by the way. Yeah, like every second of
Right.
every day, you're constantly in that now space.
Right. So that is the ultimate truth. It is the only place we ever are.
I don't think it relates to truth. It's just experience in general.
But that experience is reality, and reality is truth.
Yeah.
That experience is the only reality that we
You've got
ever
many
know at
theorists.
any given
or
moment.
theists. You got many theists that'll argue that their experiences are truth too, right? Even though as atheists we would be like, it doesn't sound for any truth, So that's still a subjective opinion.
You're speaking of their past experience or their perspective. I'm talking about perception.
Okay, well, I think that we've gotten about as much as we can out of this particular topic.
All I can perceive about it.
But I mean, hey, I'll read some de Beauvoir alongside anybody else. So I'm liking the conversation. But I think we do need to move on. So thank you, Rick, for calling in.
You made our brains go a little.
Thanks for your
or a little
always
loopy.
good. For a little exercising, that's always good. Mental exercise. But carry on, my friend. Carry on and have a good day.
All right. Okay, we've got about 10-ish minutes left. I do want to talk with Ted.
Okay.
So
is that the teddy bear guy, or from the movie, or?
If so, I am gonna need some gummy bears.
Time to crack a beer.
Yeah. Ted, can you hear us?
Yeah, and it's Chad, C-H-A-D, Chad.
Oh, Tad.
Oh, Chad. Okay.
That is cool. Hi, Chad. What can we help you with today?
I've been listening to your show as well as the Atheist Experience for about a month now.
Excellent.
And I would say until very recently, I was a Christian and a theist. And actually, it's been both of these shows that have kind of helped me think through a lot of these beliefs. And so,
that's awesome.
That.
Thank you.
And basically, I'm just calling in because kind of the last thing I'm kind of holding on to from that worldview is the idea of prayer, and how much inner peace I get out of that. And so it's kind of a scary idea to kind of let go of that. And I'm just curious where you kind of look to for inner calm.
You don't have to. You don't have to. You don't have to give up, quote unquote, prayer. You can approach it from another angle, more of a meditative side, rather than feeling that there's any divinity involved with it. So you can go home and you can speak out loud. You can do anything you would normally do. And it's also a very good way to go, meandering through your thoughts and how you feel about them too. So you can always just resort to that kind of a thing, rather than, you don't have to call it prayer anymore. Because I mean, if you're now giving up the whole faith thing, then prayer, as you know, how lots of us feel, is pretty useless, right? So you can just look at it as more of a meditative thing for yourself instead. Also, you can also talk to someone too if you want. There are people you can talk to, right? Especially if you have things that are pretty troubling. Right? So, and I'd love to. By the way, I do a little show called Deconversion Stories. So, if you're ever up for discussing how you found your way out, I'd be willing to have you on for a chat as well, Chad.
Sure, absolutely.
V's been on the show, so they know exactly how it is, right? You know.
Yeah, it's a good show.
It's a lot of fun. Yeah.
Chad, my thinking here is very, very much in line with Neil's. But I also want to stress that deconstructing a religion takes time. Mm-hmm. It takes more time than is comfortable. And everybody who deconverts has something that is more difficult to let go of than other things. And for some, it is the idea of heaven. For others, it's a fear of hell. For others, it's the idea of prayer. There are things that linger, and that's expected and that's normal. Yep. And you shouldn't beat yourself up or feel upset at all if there are things that are harder to let go of and that you keep for a little while until you're ready. Yep. Just because you don't believe in a God doesn't mean that all of a sudden everything relating to that belief has to be thrown by the wayside right away. This is a process of weaning off of a worldview. And if you do it too quickly, that could actually be harmful. So if you are having difficulty letting go of prayer, I would say keep praying. And it doesn't matter if you believe if there's somebody on the other end. If it gives you comfort, then keep praying, and maybe pray every other time you want to pray. When you want to start getting away from that. I know that for me, for a very long time, even after I deconverted and was fully out of my faith, I still felt very guilty every time I didn't pray when someone I loved was traveling, because the kind of prayer that I remembered most from my childhood was that kind of protective intercessory prayer where please send your angels to watch over this car as they're driving down, I-80. And so for me, it was very much a guilt thing where I would feel like if they get into a car accident, it is my fault because I haven't prayed for their protection, even though I didn't believe in a God anymore. And that was really emotionally difficult for me. And it took me a while of letting myself do it and giving myself that space and that grace to kind of say, okay, I'm going to indulge myself, and I'm going to be kind to myself, and I'm going to pray this time just so I feel better, even though I know it doesn't do anything. Mm-hmm. And then next time I'm not going to, and it's going to be hard, but they are going to get to their destination just fine. And then that will be one more piece of concrete evidence that I needed to be able to let go of prayer.
Yeah.
It kind of sounds like what you're saying is it's kind of like the same way someone might approach quitting smoking.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Mm-hmm. It's a habit. You've built it up. And
I've tried 3 times and failed 3 times already. So it doesn't, I guess I have to believe harder.
Yeah. And of course, there are other ways to get that same feeling of peace and that same feeling of trust that things are going to be okay, because that is an important thing to be able to access. And it can be called praying. It can be something that you continue to do and you just talk to yourself. Sometimes at night, instead of praying to a God, I'll talk to myself and I'll say, hey, V, this is what you did really good today. You really did a good job at this and this today. And maybe tomorrow, think about maybe trying this and this. And it's a good way to break down what I want, what I'm scared of, what I need, but without putting it on some kind of external force or being. And that's totally fine.
Yeah, I do the same thing, by the way.
Yeah, I'd say just
and I
give
tell the
yourself
worst
some
jokes
time
to myself.
All right.
Yeah, give yourself a little bit of time. Maybe play around with different kinds of prayer. Play around with meditating. Play around with, saying a favorite poem over and over again. Try talking to yourself. Do different things. See if something feels good, and if it does, follow that. And if you still need to continue praying for a little while, just to make yourself feel better as you're moving out of this religion, which is very hard. And kudos to you for doing, because that is, just very difficult. then okay, that's fine. We're not going to call you a bad atheist. You're not going to say that you're not doing it right. You're not late. You're
no
on
true
your
atheist
time.
fallacy.
Right, exactly. You can pray and you can be an atheist. There, I said it.
Yep.
So you officially have permission to pray.
Well, yeah, and that's one of my frustrations actually with, this journey has been when I've asked these questions to my friends inside the church and my pastor. I've asked these questions about these important issues that I think, the church gets wrong and that even the Bible gets wrong. And usually the answer I get is, well, you need to come to church more and you need to pray more. And I'm like, well, that's not actually going to give these answers.
Right.
They just want your money.
So to actually, yeah.
You better come to church more because we're missing a few bucks in the tithing plate.
Well, no, a lot of the time it's also...
Even inside the church, I've never been a good tither, so...
well, sometimes people will give you the answer that they got and the answer that helped them. And for them, probably it was, oh, well, I just listened to a lot of worship music and then I felt better, which is, true, and that helped them. But if what you're searching for is truth and what you're searching for is a way out, then yeah, going to church more probably is only going to push you farther away, I found. So yeah, I hope this helped, Chad. We do need to wrap up, but I do also want to stress there are groups out there. As we said, there is a Discord conversation happening right after this at 3 p.m. Central. So the Discord is a place full of people who have deconverted, who are in various phases of leaving their faith, and would be more than happy to talk with you there. There's also something called Recovering from Religion Foundation, which has a hotline project. And what you can do is you can call people when you're feeling anxious or you're feeling overwhelmed by this process and talk to somebody else who's been through it, and just talk with somebody and talk about prayer, talk about talking with somebody who can help. Sometimes it's nice to actually hear someone answering on the other end.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to suggest the same thing because I have links to all those, like secular therapy, recovering from religion, journey free, et cetera, on each of the shows that I do, because that's exactly what I deal with, is people that have freshly come out of their belief systems, and it's not always easy for everyone. Like, nobody takes the same journey that I did, where it was a slow enough process that I wasn't traumatically affected by it.
Right.
So, but Chad, someone in the chat will put my contact information in the chat, and you can get in touch with me, and we'll talk. Okay, man.
All right. Awesome.
All right.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Chad.
Yeah. Thanks, Chad.
Yeah. Thank you for your time.
Bye. All right. I think that's it. I think we are good. We have about 2 minutes left. And I do want to make sure that we give a shout out to our crew who's been putting this on and been managing all of that. Hey guys, love you all. And it's our favorite crew member, the cat. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on the show with me today, Neil. I had a blast. I don't know if
I had so much fun. I'll admit, I was a little nervous because this is a much higher level platform than what I'm used to with my own show. And but towards the, a little after the beginning of the show, I just be yourself, be the usual ridiculous moron that you are most of the time. And apparently it's endearing quality. So I hope you guys are all right with how I presented today. So.
Oh yeah, no, we had some good conversations. We kept it kind of light.
Yeah.
But that's my jam. I love it. All right. Let's throw up.
It doesn't have to be heavy-handed all the time, right?
Exactly. Let's throw up some love rings.
Let's do that, yeah.
Nope, other side. This way. Okay. Ready? And...
Wait, there, yeah.
Whoop. There we go.
There we go. Just goes to show magic isn't real, people.
There you go. It's all an illusion.
That's right.
All right. So, you know how we end the show?
Yeah. You see, I hear it every week when I listen. And
there you go. That's the right answer.
Come time to do it, and then I'm like,
that's okay. All right. So, First of all, we want to thank all of the first responders and essential workers, and I'm going to add protesters that are out doing the good work this week and putting your lives on the line in many different ways and with many different forms of protest and danger kind of coming at you. So we appreciate you, and we really, really value the work that you are doing to keep all of us safe.
Absolutely.
To those of you who don't believe, to Chad, this is a community for you. We welcome you here. You're home. You're safe, and we like you just the way you are.
Yeah.
And for those of you who do believe, we don't hate you.
Don't hate you.
We just think you're wrong.
What are we doing, man? What are we doing?
No, you're done.